This whole dive into copper bullets has been fascinating for me, and you guys should check it out. Go to barnesbullets.com and have a look at the website and check out these bullets. I'm going to tell you a little bit about what I've found with them. But what they talk about is, like since 1989, they've been engineering the most technologically advanced hunting bullets and ammunition on the planet. And the more I shoot these suckers, the more I tend to believe it. They're manufactured here in the USA. In fact, their facility is down by my dad's ranch in central Utah. And what I've found is they really do create a little bit better penetration. They expand on impact, so the blood trails are quite a bit larger, and they do a little bit more damage, putting that animal down a little, faster. It's a way. In fact, on their website it says produce massive wound channels even in dense, thick-skinned game, and that is true. I found that to be true for sure. Check them out, and check out the episode I did with Barnes. So it's 191 with Mitch Cookson, and he gets into great detail about how these bullets are designed and why they're better. Definitely worth some consideration. Go to barnesbullets.com, have a look for yourself, make a decision, let me know what you think. See ya. I'd like to welcome Mystery Ranch as a sponsor to the Western Huntsman. This is a great product. Specifically, we're going to talk about the Mysterium line. Those packs include the Sawtooth 45, the Sawtooth 65, the Beartooth 85, and the Marshall 105, depending on, what you're doing with the pack. If you from day pack to backcountry, plenty of space. I like what they wrote on the website. Between the disciplines of calculated preparation and in-the-moment focus, an intangible alchemy exists. We call it Mysterium. It is our most ambitious, tech-rich line of Mystery Ranch hunting packs, constructed for the most methodical hunters. I'd agree with that. It's a great pack, guys. I really like the ventilation system. When you put it on, it's nice and tight, but you're still breathing a little bit less of that buildup between the pack and your back when you're sweating and out there packing through the mountains and whatnot. It's a super functional pack, very comfortable, very good at carrying loads. I've been using it all spring between bear and just like I do a lot of rucking to keep in shape, and it has done a phenomenal job. I've got a lot of top-of-the-line packs out there, and I've always kind of geeked out with packs, but I really do like the weight distribution and the way that it allows you multiple options as to where you're going to either carry a water bladder or one of those Contigo containers or whatever you're going to use. Really impressed. I love the ease of how everything functions on it, too. You don't need to watch a bunch of videos to figure out how to undo everything to pack a bunch of meat out. That's really important for a guy like me, I promise. I'm not super smart. So the simplicity, the comfort, the load distribution, it all makes for a wonderful backcountry hunting pack. If you are in the market, check it out at mysteryranch.com/mysterium. Ladies and gentlemen, are you ready to make this elk season your best season yet? If you answered yes, my friends, you are in the right place. From the Western Huntsman podcast, brought to you by Phelps Game Calls, welcome to the School of September, the most comprehensive elk hunting series on the planet. We bring you the world's top archery elk experts to talk strategy, calling, and everything else to get you one step closer to some of your wildest dreams. From the Broken Tine Studio to your knowledge toolbox, class is in session. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this episode of the Western Huntsman podcast, and a kind of a solo School of September I wanted to do for you guys, just because I get some questions that come sent in, via email or DM or whatever on the old Instagram there, and I never have a chance to fully answer those because I get sidetracked with the guest and whatnot. And so I figured I'd throw kind of like this. It's not the last School of September before September, but it's getting down to it. Right. And so anyway, plus I just kind of revamped the studio behind me here since we're recording the video part of these now, which gave me kind of a complex. I figured I'd throw the old Broken Times bowl back up behind me. Oh, I got to lift the camera here. I'll tilt the camera up. There you go. There's old Broken Times. That's why the studio is named the Broken Times Studios, because of that guy right there. And so, anyway, I'm going to cover a few things in this episode that I think are going to really help some of you guys that are either just getting into it, or maybe have only been out in the September Elkwoods, a couple of times, a handful of times. And some of you more salty, seasoned guys, some of this stuff might be a little bit obvious, but it might be a good reminder. And so, not a terrible listen here for those of us as we gear up for September. Because what's the day here? Let me grab my phone. It is currently September 25th, and I know, like, so in Idaho, we'll be hunting on this. My cousin Andrew's coming up. I'm going to take him up to kind of this secret little spot I have on the Idaho side. It's just over on from the Montana border. That opens the 30th, so that's only 5 days away, less, because it's like, end of day now. And then here in Montana, my season opens on the 7th. And so again, we're just coming right into this, and we're just knocking on the door of September, and I'm really, really excited. So what I wanted to cover a few gear stuff, some other preparation stuff. Here's another question that I've been seeing a lot. In fact, I think I've had like 4 people message me about mountain thermals in the last couple of months. So I'm going to describe what those are just real quick and briefly, and kind of tell you how to use them to your advantage versus, like if you're coming from back east or something and you're used to, like a prevailing wind in the whitetail stand. The mountain thermals are very, very different. Then I'm going to tell a couple of stories about mistakes that I've made that have cost me notching a tag. And the reason I'm going to do that is because I don't want you to make the same mistake and do the same thing that I did and leave the mountain empty-handed. And that's kind of part of a broader thing that I'm working on. I'd love to get your guys' input on this. I'm working on a book because I like to write. And I don't know if this book will go anywhere or if it'll just sit on my laptop, and either one is fine with me because, again, I get bored. I like to write. And so I'm kind of working on this book where I am talking about, well, let me back up. A lot of books are based on, hey, I'm really good at elk hunting, or I'm really good at deer hunting, and here's why. Here's all my success stories and blah, blah, blah. And they're not all like this, but they're not super educational because of that. So I thought, if somebody put together like this content in like a book form where it broke down like mistakes that are made over the years, it might save a lot of people a lot of headaches. And so I thought it would be kind of fun to write that. And so I've been working on that. It's almost done. Let me know what you guys think about that concept. Hit me up at jim@thewesternhuntsman.com. I'd love to get your feedback. Is that a book that you would want to read? Again, it's just each chapter is a different elk hunt, a different mistake that I made personally that cost me an elk. And it's very detailed. And I go through and kind of discuss what I did wrong and why it blew that elk out, or why I couldn't get an arrow in that bowl or whatever. So let me know if you'd be interested in that. And then that's basically what's going to be making up this episode. So let's just kind of dive right into it. And bear with me. I know it's always a little awkward when I do these without a guest. It's like not natural for me. I'm used to having a guest to ask some questions, and I start talking too fast or whatever. But I'm trying to get better at it. So there's a lot of good information I think that you're going to get out of this one. Okay. So let's kick this episode off. I've got if you're watching this and you see me looking over here, I've got a secondary screen that I've got pulled up with a bunch of notes on it. So if I'm looking away, that's what's going on. So guys, as we come into September and this big thing that, on this show, we talk about it all year long. A big focus is always archery elk hunting. I talk a lot about rifle elk hunting. I talk a lot about mule deer hunting. We talk whitetail hunting. We talk a lot of bear hunting, and other predator hunting and whatnot. But, if you were to strip down, all the passions most of us have in this world, I was talking to another guide yesterday. In fact, he's been on the show. His name's Pastor Jim. He's my pastor at church. But I was talking to him, and he guides during season, and he was telling me, I really cut back on the rifle guiding during rifle season. And he said because it's not as exciting for him, and it's a different animal. And he said that the hunters that we get as a guide, they're very different from archery hunters to the rifle hunters. The rifle hunters, they show up maybe a little unprepared with not great gear. Maybe they're out of shape. Maybe they're just not super motivated to be here. They got, talked into it by a friend, or it's a company retreat, or it's just something when they thought they wanted to try out. And you know what? That's totally fine. There's nothing wrong with that. I enjoy the rifle season, and I enjoy the hunters that I usually get for it. But he was saying, and he's right, he prefers to guide during archery season. And that's because the hunters tend to be in better shape. They're more motivated. They're more dialed into what they need to do. They understand the grit that's required of them. Whoops. There we go. Anyway, sorry, my computer was doing weird things. Anyway, so and he was talking about that, and man, it does make sense. And so I don't ever want to take away from like anybody listening that's planning to do a rifle hunt, because a lot of the stuff I'm going to talk about in this episode it will pertain to a rifle hunt as well. And so don't discount this information as it's not just archery specific. And I am going to do a lot of rifle elk hunt episodes coming up. I've got some really good guests lined up for that, by the way. We're like going to do, I don't know, School of October or November or whatever. But right now, this is School of September. And so that's what we're going to focus on. You want to make sure, as you're coming into archery elk season, that you are fully prepared. You have to be more prepared for archery season. There are more things to get ready than like a rifle hunt. With the exception of a rifle hunt, you might need more gear because it's usually later in the year and it's colder and you need more, cold stuff. But overall, I feel like outside of shooting, you need to shoot a rifle just as much as you shoot your bow to be proficient. But you really need to be in a little bit better shape for archery. You need to have your gear a little more dialed in, and you need to shoot with your gear on. Shoot your bow with your gear on. You need to have a little bit better understanding of these animals because you're hunting them during the rut. That's a very different thing than these post-rut bulls that you go after with a rifle. The rut, you have to understand their behavioral side of it. You have to understand the nuances of the region that you're hunting in. Are you hunting in a real dry climate where you're going to need to focus real closely on water? Or are you hunting, further up north where, there's wallows and creeks and everything everywhere, and that's not really a central focus? Those little nuances will make a big difference. If you're hunting in like New Mexico or Utah or most of Colorado, Arizona, those kind of places, you really need to focus on those areas where they have free access to water, lots of water, right? If you're hunting Montana, Wyoming, high country, Idaho, Washington, Oregon, those kind of places, there's going to be a lot more access to water. And so maybe your focus is more on bedding areas and shelves and north face slopes and stuff like that. The point is if you're listening to this, it means that you're serious about archery hunting in September for a bull elk, and you are in for one heck of an adventure. And I commend you for committing to that, because it's not easy. I've been doing this for a long time, and it is not easy. These bulls will give you the proverbial middle finger more often than they'll give you an archery shot. And so be ready. If this is your first time, you need to have a little bit of thick skin in terms of being heartbroken, because they're going to break your heart. So let's start with a little bit of gear discussion. First of all, the one of the biggest things that I've that people make a mistake on going into like an archery elk season, you want to be prepped and ready to do a minimum. And I say this at like, if you are like just the minimum, bare minimum mileage wise in a mountain, 2.5 miles needs to be nothing for you. 2.5 miles in, 2.5 miles out. That needs to be very achievable, very doable, and you need to do it in really good time. Okay. Again, always remember when we're talking
School of September and this archery stuff, there's always going to be somebody that gets out of their truck and chimes in with their, I don't know, their hoochie mama 100 yards from their truck, and a big bull elk's going to come running in. So I know that there are exceptions to all of these rules, and I couldn't agree more. There are definitely exceptions to all of this stuff. But as a whole, physically fit, you need to be at least able to go 2.5 miles in on a daily basis. This means you have to have really good boots that are broken in. Don't buy a pair of boots and expect to take them out of the box on opening day and go in and be okay, because they're going to wreck your feet. Those boots need to form to your feet. Everybody's feet are a little bit different. I know a lot about this. I was a Marine Corps infantryman, which means we went pretty much everywhere on foot with a lot of weight on our back with crappy jungle boots that the Marine Corps issued. So trust me when I tell you, nothing will ruin a hunt faster than if you wreck your feet because your boots aren't broken in or you're not wearing the proper footwear, meaning you don't want to wear cotton socks with $500 boots, right? Don't get the old Fruit of the Loom cotton socks and go out and try to truck it through the mountains with those chintzy socks, because the cotton, I don't know what, and this might be different for a lot of different people, but for me, cotton wrecks my feet. I can only wear cotton if, like, I'll put them on if I'm wearing cowboy boots or something, and I'm, going to a meeting at work or going to church or going, seeing the girls' basketball game or something like that, right? That's fine. But if I'm going hunting, it's always wool. I always have wool socks. I always have an extra set of wool socks in my pack, and I switch those out. I don't let my feet stay wet, and I don't let that sweat sitting there all day. Halfway through the day, I'm changing those socks. If you don't do what I tell you and you get giant blisters on your feet, I have a hot tip for you for that too. And that is something I learned from my wife. My wife, a lot of you might not know, is formerly like this state Olympic gymnastics champion back in the day. And they taught her this little trick that I'm gonna tell you. If you get big blisters on your feet, yes, there's always things like moleskin, and you want to have all that in your pack. But don't laugh. Preparation H. Rub Preparation H on that blister, and it will heal a lot faster than anything else that you can use. Don't use like Neosporin or something like that. I did it. In fact, I could show you what my feet look like right now, because I'm trying out these new pair of boots, and they my feet don't sit super tight in the bottom. So when I'm going up and downhill, my feet are moving up and down, and I'm getting these huge blisters on the back of my feet. I'm working them in, so it won't do that anymore. And but in the meantime, I'm putting Preparation H on those blisters, and that's what you want to do. I recommend during the summer months, guys, you still have time. I mean, even if you have like a week or two before your hunt kicks off, I would do this. Load your pack roughly heavier in weight than what you're going to carry on a daily basis and start rucking. Go about 2.5 miles a day. Try to get some elevation gain. Go up hills, down hills, and just really load down your pack. A lot of people have, they have like those weighted packs you can get. And I know a lot of people have done that. I know guys that put like sandbags and attach sandbags to give them like 80 pounds in the pack kind of thing. If you don't want to get that elaborate, here's what I do. Costco sells those cases of water, the water bottles. I just load my pack up with a bunch of water bottles. I get that thing to like 75 pounds. And this year, what I'm using as a daily pack is my Sawtooth 45 from Mystery Ranch. It's the best day pack I've ever had. I've been working with this thing all summer. I love it. It's smaller than I'm used to. I'm used to having a bigger pack. But I'm finding that you don't need all that room for a day pack unless you're going into the backcountry overnight kind of thing. I'm able to put like my jet boil and all the other stuff that I did a gear episode, I don't know, a few months back, School of September gear. I have all that stuff I said in that pack in this Sawtooth 45, and it's a very tight-fitting, breathable pack. I love this thing. So it's my recommendation for this episode would be that Mystery Ranch Sawtooth 45. But anyway, I have that thing loaded down with a bunch of water bottles, and I'm hiking about 2.5, 3 miles a day. And sometimes I'll wreck my feet pretty bad, and I'll give my feet a break on these new boots. And so maybe every other day, and that's totally fine. But the point is when you go into the woods with your bow and that it's season opener, and you put just half that weight on your back, man, it's going to be way easier. It makes life way better. So that's that. Okay. What else did I write down here gear wise? I think that pretty well covers it. Y'all. Yeah. Okay. Those are kind of your last minute prep things, right? And I'd be remiss if I don't mention be shooting your bow every day. And I recommend shooting up to 60 yards. And you're going to find out why in some of these stories coming up. But I recommend up to 60 yards. Now, a lot of guys I hear out there, they're shooting up to 100 yards. That's going to be super regionally dependent as to where you're hunting. If you're hunting in Colorado or Utah or Wyoming or somewhere in that open sage prairie country kind of stuff, you're going to want to be able to be a little bit more proficient out to further distances, 100 yards or whatever. I have no judgment on that. For me personally, 60 yards is max, and that's because of the country I'm hunting. You're rarely going to have a bull in this neck of the woods further out than that top pin, that 20-yard pin. So I do a lot of shooting, and I shoot uphill, downhill. I shoot through trees and limbs and branches and all this stuff because I don't want to have just like this straight, wide open range. I've got a bow target like 20 yards out, and I'm in my backyard, and the barbecue's going over here, and I've got nothing in the way kind of thing. That's great. You want to do that on a daily basis, but also make sure you're getting into positions where you're shooting from your knee, you're shooting between some branches and through some timber and in shade and shadows versus just straight daylight. All those little factors change. And on the mountain, you're going to find there's no such thing as just this perfect broadside 20-yard, type kind of shot. It's such a rare thing, guys. It's such a rare thing. They're always quartering to or quartering away or coming at you straight, or other scenarios where they're moving or where they stop. Their vitals are blocked by a huckleberry brush. That kind of stuff is really, really what you want to focus on. So hopefully that helps you guys with your last minute prep stuff. And we will switch this over to. Oh, by the way, I had the idea. Yeah. So go get you the Preparation H, folks, and snap a picture. If you got the balls to do it, snap a picture of yourself buying Preparation H and tag me. We'll really get weird on Instagram. But it's stuff I'm telling you guys, it really does work. Okay, mountain thermals. Okay, so I think that a lot of the questions that I'm getting from folks on these mountain thermals are because they don't live here. Hang on. They don't live in the mountains and they're not used to hunting in the mountains. Maybe they're coming from the Midwest or the East Coast or whatever, and they just are unfamiliar with what mountain thermals are. And they hear a lot of people talking about them. Like, we say it on this show all the time. Hey, you got to watch your thermals. Well, what is a thermal? What is a mountain thermal versus a prevailing wind versus just regular breeze from your regular breeze? What creates wind is heat. Okay, so heat heats up the ground, and this is where you're going to get a prevailing wind. Let's say you're in the Midwest, you've got this whitetail stand, you're like, man, I always get this real steady breeze at 2:30 p.m. and it blows for 3 hours at a southwest, kind of thing. So I set my tree stand up so I'm, out of the nose of the whitetail. Okay, what creates that is the ground is heating up, and you've heard the expression that heat rises, right? Heat rises, and what goes up must come down, right? And so as heat rises, it is replaced with cooler air, and as the heat is lifting out, that cooler air is blowing in, right? Okay, and I'm not like a scientist, and so I'm not going to give you like this real technical thing as to what creates wind, but that's the general concept. So if you're hunting a whitetail stand in Kansas, and you've got this steady, you could set your clock to this prevailing wind on a daily basis, that's essentially what's creating it. The heat is rising. The ground is heating the air starts rising, cooler air blows in underneath it. It's like a vacuum, right? It's also kind of what, if you think about what creates a hurricane, every year out, in the Gulf of Mexico. No, Gulf of America. Sorry. And down in like the Caribbean and all those places that smack into Florida, heat right above the ocean is warming up the air. That air is lifting up away from the water, and cooler air is coming in to replace that lifted up air, and it gets really strong and dramatic and creates a storm. And next thing you know, you've got Hurricane Irvin, or whatever the heck that one they're talking about right now is called. So now that you know that, now that you have that kind of in your head, mountain thermals are almost the same exact concept, except what happens is in the mountains, it changes a lot. You can't really set your watch other than when thermals turn to going up versus down. Okay, so in the mountains, you've got elevation, you've got pressures and air thickness. If I'm saying this right, I'm kind of trying to figure out the best way to explain this. Thicknesses change, pressures change, exposure changes, and heat changes. So again, the sun doesn't come out and heat up the air and make it rise. The sun comes out and heats up the ground, which heats up the air, and that's what creates the rise. Okay, hopefully this is making sense. So mountain thermals. In the morning, before the sun comes up, the ground is nice and cool, right? There's and it could be no breeze whatsoever. It's nice and cool, and due to the general nature of how God made the earth, that cool air is slowly and gently just going downhill. Okay, it's cool air, so it's going down. There's no energy to make it rise. What raises a hot air balloon is heat, right? So there's no energy to make that air rise in the morning. So if you're starting on a ridge at sunup and you're up high and you walk in and 150 yards down the mountain is a couple of bull elk bedded down or moving to their feeding area, they will smell you and you won't even notice the thermals unless you use your wind checker. And I highly recommend using a wind checker. Very, very, you should be filling that wind checker up halfway through season. Okay. So that's what those thermals are doing. Now the sun starts coming up and it starts heating that ground up, and it's making the air right next to the ground. It's warming that air, and it's going to start rising, and it's going to start swirling for a minute because it's confused. It's starting to get warm enough to start rising, but it's still cool enough that it's not going downhill. And it's not going uphill. It's just kind of swirling a little bit. It's a great time to move through the mountain, by the way. Because it's not really going anywhere. Okay. And this is when we're devoid of a regular breeze or like wind. Okay. If there's a storm that is blowing and it's windy, that is going to trump your thermals. That will carry the thermals in the direction that the wind is blowing. Okay. Now that sun is going to continue to heat up that ground, and then that air is going to get warmer and start going up. This happens, in my neck of the woods. It's always like between 8 and 9 a.m. Is generally where that happens. And honestly, the higher elevation you get, that tends to get a little bit later. I've had thermals still going downhill at like 9:30 at like 10,000 feet elevation in the past. Okay, so elevation is gonna make a difference because it takes longer to heat that up, and the heat. I don't know. It's weird because you think, higher elevation, I'm closer to the sun, it'd be warmer faster, but it just doesn't work that way. And again, I'm not a scientist, and I can't quite really explain that. So now you've got those thermals going up. Okay, that's a great time to be on top of the ridge, working those ridges, and calling into that drainage and trying to locate bulls that way. That's going to go on all day long. Now, let's talk about all day long. Thermals are going to consistently be going uphill most of the day. The only thing that's going to change that is a prevailing wind or a wind breeze from storms or cloud cover moving in. You get a really dark cloud that comes in and blocks that sun for 45 minutes. You can potentially see those thermals shift, and I have. But for the most part, after those thermals have shifted to an upward motion, you're going to be pretty well clear and know that is going to remain in the upward motion most of the day. Now, elk live by thermals. It's not by accident that elk tend to go downhill at night and feed in the bottoms, and then as the sun starts coming up, start moving uphill for all of that for the day to bed down, right? Because when they're bedded down, thermals are coming up. They can usually see what's above them, and they can smell anything below it. So that's that protective mode that they're in, right? That they're got to remember. It's not just us with bows out there that like to eat elk. There's a lot of things out there that like to eat elk. So that's what they're doing. Then at night, they go down and they are in the bottom of like a drainage. Maybe there's some meadow with some good grass or whatever they're feeding on, and they can smell anything trying to come at them from above because those thermals are coming downhill. So elk live by mountain thermals. They do this for a living. I say that all the time. Elk do this for a living. So you've got to really pay attention to that. Once those thermals are up during the day, again, outside of a strong breeze or a windstorm or something like that, you can pretty much count on them going up. Roughly, and again, this is going to be regionally dependent based on, how hot it is where you're hunting, your sun exposure and other things like, how far south you are, what your elevation is, all that kind of stuff. But in my area, it is generally consistently thermals going up until sunset. And that's when you start getting that swirling effect again, and they start shifting to a downhill thermal. I've heard a lot of people describe thermals as, they're going up until about 4 o'clock, maybe 5 o'clock, and then they shift it down. That's not true. That ground retains the heat. If you ever touched a rock that's been around your campfire, that you had a campfire burning for a few hours, and then you put the campfire out, but that rock is still super hot, that heat retains itself in the ground, which continues to warm the air up and lift those thermals in an upward direction until that sun literally goes behind a mountain and sets. And that's when that temperature really drops. Then you start seeing some swirling, and then you'll start and I've hunted areas, I should note this, where the thermals were still going up long after it was dark because the ground was so hot. Real rocky areas where they're like, again, the campfire expression with the retained heat in those rocks. Those kind of areas, a lot of times those thermals will start going up.
Experience the evolution of accuracy with the new Browning X-Bolt 2. Guys, this rifle is something else. With the introduction of the X-Bolt, Browning has set a new standard in the development of bolt-action rifles. It was created around the goal of total accuracy, where every component worked in unison to improve downrange performance straight out of the box, from windswept tundras to rocky peaks high above the tree line to African plains and everywhere in between. The X-Bolt delivered the tack-driving accuracy a Browning rifle is respected for. And that's super true, guys. I really like this rifle from a standpoint of, it's not super heavy, it's not super light. I put a really nice scope on it. I love that Veritech stock because that is like one of those pieces of accuracy that, that interface between the rifle and the shooter. Not everybody's the same size. The DLX trigger, you can get the plus magazine system for extra rounds. Great all-around rifle in the field. For those of you that are looking for a rifle this year to take to the field that you can feel real confident in and get really comfortable with, this is the rifle to check out. The Browning X-Bolt 2 should be one of your top contenders. Link is in the show notes.
Other things to know about thermals. If you're side heeling in and out of drainages, you're going several miles in and out, you're up on top of a ridge, and then 20 minutes later, you're down on the bottom of a draw, and then you're going back up kind of thing. Keep in mind that at 8:45, right, in the morning, those thermals will be going down most likely. But if you get to an open face, either within the drainage or on top of the ridge or whatever, and it's got a lot of sun exposure and that sun's been beating on it since 7 a.m., you could be in a situation where you walk and your thermals are going down, and then you hit a spot where all of a sudden they're going up, okay? And then you keep going for 100 yards, and then bam, all of a sudden they're going back down. That's why don't have a wind checker tucked into your pack somewhere. that wind checker needs to be out with you at all times, because you need to be using that thing like 100 times a day. The slightest change in condition on a mountain, you need to check that wind. Okay, if you go from a north face to a east face slope, you need to check that wind. If you go from shadows and shade to sun, you need to check that wind. If you go from it's sunny outside and then a big black September cloud rolls over and starts covering that sun up, you need to check the wind. Any slight change or alteration within the environment that you're in, you're going to want to check that wind. Okay, so get yourself a wind checker. Make sure you have a refill deal back in the truck, because if you start running out, it like. What did we talk about? This was several episodes back, but we were talking about using all of our senses. You want to hear the elk, you want to smell the elk, you want to see the elk, you want to taste the elk on that's really hard to describe. But sometimes if you walk into a spot where it's like this dark timber and the wind's not blowing, but the elk were just in there, right? Maybe they were bedded there all day, and then they just got up to go find water or something, but they've been peeing in there. They've been pooping in there. They've been laying in there. They've been rubbing their antlers in there, whatever. You can almost taste it, and that's part of using all your senses. But an added sense that you want to use is that wind checker. Okay. That thing is going to be, I think it's one of the most critical pieces of gear that we can have. And you can get them for like $1 on Amazon, so well, I guess another way to put it is, if you just spent $2,500 on a new bow to go out this archery elk season, but you don't spend the $5 on a decent wind checker, that $2,500 bow is going to do you no good. Always have a wind checker and always use it, even if you feel like there's no wind, because in the mountains, there's always a thermal and that air is always moving. So you need to know what direction it's moving and not move towards elk in the same direction. Hopefully that clarifies it, guys. That was a quick snapshot, Mountain Thermals 101 for you. And hopefully that satisfies, some of the questions that I've seen on that. So, okay. I'm going to talk about a couple of mistakes that I've made now, tell you guys some stories of things that have happened. And again, this is all kind of in greater detail in this book I'm working on. But I want to talk about this particular bull that I want to say, I always have random weird names for elk encounters on that bull. This one I called him the slingshot bull, because I kept going, I kept wanting to go down the drainage, but then he'd bugle and he'd call me back up, and I'd slingshot my way back up, and then I'd get up there and he'd stop calling. And so I'd start heading back down, and then, oh, there he is. He's calling again. He's up the mountain. Okay, I'm trucking back up. So I kept slingshotting back and forth. And I had worked myself up on this ridge, and he was like across the drainage on the other ridge, about 50 yards below the ridge, if that makes sense, bedded in some timber, and he was really fired up. I mean, he was really bugling. There. Sorry, I'm drinking water. It's a lot to talk when you don't have a guest to give you a break. He's really bugling over there, and I wouldn't even necessarily instigate this guy. He would just start bugling and chuckling and making all sorts of ruckus over there. And so I went way up above, circled around, dropped onto the same slope that he was on, and got at the same elevation and worked my way into him. It was like this textbook call-in. I got right up in his business and ripped out this giant bugle, and it felt like the earth was shaking. He was so mad. He let me have it. And at first, all I could see was the tops of his tines. And he starts raking this brush. It's like huckleberry brush. Up here, we get this real thick, tall huckleberry brush. And they love to rake this stuff. And they'll disappear in it. Sometimes this brush gets taller than they are. And it's similar to your alder brush kind of stuff. You get in those thick willow bottoms kind of country. Real similar. So anyway, I could see him, he just raking this brush. So I couldn't find a stick, so I used my bugle tube, and I'm raking the brush over here, and it's and he's getting madder and madder and madder, and it's like, oh man, he is coming for sure. I took a few steps to my left, knocked an arrow, drew back, Here he comes bolting his way out. He's about 40 yards right now. He closes the distance to like 30, and then all of a sudden he's at 20 yards broadside. All I needed him to do was just stop, and he starts slowing down, and then he makes eye contact with me, turns around as fast as he came in, and disappears out of my life forever. I'll tell you exactly what cost me that bull is the fact that when I took those few steps to the left, I got myself out of the shadows and right into direct sunlight, making me stand out like a sore thumb. Okay. Remember, if you listened to a couple of episodes back with James Nash, he was talking about the shades of colors that elk see in, and they see green very well. Well, I was wearing camo, full on camo, which is great if I'm shadowed. But if I'm not shadowed, I really stuck out like a sore thumb. And so he saw me. He recognized that I was not a normal thing that he would see, making bugle sounds at him and raking trees. And he turned around. He was a good bull too, by the way. He was a really good bull. He was a six point bull. I'd probably, public land. This was North Idaho, public land, North Idaho. I'd probably mark him somewhere around that 270-ish mark, and for that area, it's a really good bull, super respectable bull. And but he wasn't having it. So the lesson in that story is watch your shadows and watch your sunlight. When you're doing a setup, you've got a bull coming in, you really want to watch your setup and make sure you don't step into the daylight or even have like beads of light that are getting reflected off of you or the gear that you're wearing, because the bulls will see that. This was not the only time I'd made this mistake. And so it's really important. Try to be in the darkest timber or the darkest shadows or within the brush without obscuring your shot, if that makes sense. You don't want to be in like this openness without any backdrop or anything hiding you, and just stand there and expect that bull to not pick up on you. Okay? All right. Hopefully that saves somebody that same heartache that I had that day. All right, the next one is pinned behind a tree instead of a... Oh, yeah, so this one was super interesting. I had the brilliant idea. I had this bull coming in. And again, where I'm writing about this in this book, it's in way more detail, and it'll really make more sense. But I'm way more articulate when I write, by the way, than when I talk, which is ironic because I have a podcast. Anyway, I had this bull coming in, and he was like coming from above me down. And it was, we just had that big mountain thermal discussion, and I was really worried about the thermals because they were going up. This is like midday. This bull's coming in. He's pretty irritated with me because I'd been heckling him for a long time with my bugle tube. Finally get him all mad, and he starts coming, and he's kind of coming down, but not like straight above me, kind of at an angle. He's coming down, and I'm looking around. I'm like, man, I just knocked an arrow. And I'm looking around, where am I going to stand? I need a shooting lane. And I stepped behind this tree because if I went any further, I'd be in the sunlight. And I knew better. I was like, okay, I'd learned that lesson. I'm not going to stand in the sunlight. I'm going to stay in the shadows. But I was like behind this big cedar tree and hidden very well. And I for some reason in my panicky thought, I thought, man, if I stand behind a tree, it'll block my wind, it'll block my thermals, which is just stupid. But when you're super hocked up on adrenaline, that might have made sense. So he comes out at like 15 yards broadside, perfect. And guess what? I couldn't shoot him because the tree was literally right in my way. The only option I had was to take a step to my right and hope he would give me enough time to I already had my bow drawn. So I slowly take a step to the right and I expose myself from this tree, and he picks up on me before, again, that saying, they do this for a living. As soon as he saw that movement coming around that tree, he was blown and he was out of there, and it sounded like a freight train going back up the mountain. So the moral of this story is don't pigeonhole yourself or pin yourself behind a tree. Make sure you're in front of a tree. Okay, that little mistake cost. And he wasn't like a monster, but he was a good bull. He was like a 5x, and I would have been super proud of him. I'm not a trophy hunter. I'm good. Like in my area, Montana, I can't shoot a spike, and that's a bummer because I'd love to shoot a spike. They taste great. And I'm not ashamed of shooting a spike bull. any elk with your bow is a trophy in my mind. And so it was a heartbreaker just as much as the big ones are. So yeah, just keep that in your mental toolbox. Don't stand behind a tree and pigeonhole yourself. This next one is he is a drop tine bull, and I'm just going to I've told this story a few times on the show, so I apologize if it's a little redundant, but I had the bright idea to try to film my hunts, do the solo filming thing, and I didn't know how to do it. I don't know how to like self-film. A lot of guys are really good at that. They're good at like attaching cameras in different places where it doesn't obstruct you or stand out or be in the way in any way, shape, or form. I'm not like that. I made the mistake of not thinking that part through prior to the hunt. And so what I did is I bought this shoulder strap mount for a Tacticam, one of those little 4K Tacticam cameras, and they're really good cameras, by the way. If this wouldn't have happened, this would have been great footage. But I strapped it to my shoulder, and if you're watching, you can see it. Like my left shoulder is right here, and it attaches to your shoulder strap on your pack. So it's like a parrot sitting on your shoulder, right? And it's perfect because when you draw your bow, right, it's pointed in the direction your bow is drawn. Because like in Idaho and Montana, you cannot actually. I better check. I'm pretty sure this is still the case, but at the time, this was an Idaho hunt. You could not mount any kind of electronic to your weapon. So I couldn't have the Tacticam mounted to my bow like you can in a lot of states. And so this is what I did. I strapped it to my shoulder strap, and I had there was another way I mounted a different camera, but it was like to your hat kind of thing with almost like I was wearing it like a headlamp, and that was pretty good too. Anyway, I'm working my way up this ridge that I have failed so many times on killing a bull because it is so difficult. These elk, and there's always a bull with them, would bed down at the very top of this hill. And it's like this big round mountain. And it took me a couple of years to figure out how to get up this thing. Again, what I told you earlier, elk live by thermals. So if they bedded down up there, they'd be all over that hill. So anything coming up that hill during the day, those mountain thermals were alerting them to anybody approaching them. Okay, so that's where I got this concept that elk do this for a living and they live by mountain thermals. So I figured out that there was this like hidden, I wouldn't call it a drainage. A drainage is bigger, but it was like this cut just below this one ridge going up to the top of this mountain where they'd all bed down. And I would bugle from the same spot every time I attempted this hunt. And almost every time, I would get a response. And this day was no exception. And it was like, I don't know, 8:30-ish, 9 o'clock-ish in the morning, something like that. Thermals were just starting to go up. And I'd try to cover the ground as quick as I could, but the elk wouldn't get to the top until those thermals were going up. They were coming out of their morning feeding areas, and they were working their way up this mountain. So I'd try to kind of be parallel with them walking on the other side, but then I'd have to wait for them to get all bedded down and whatnot, and then I'd make my move. But I had to figure out this little secret area that the thermals wouldn't bust me in, and I did. I finally figured it out. It was like this zigzaggy way to get to the top where I could like stay out of the thermals. And again, difficult to explain here, but if I put it out as a book, you'll understand it a lot more. It's more detailed. Anyway, so I get up, I let that bugle off. Man, this sucker, big old herd bull, he screams back at me, and he's about 100 yards at this point. I'm like, okay, I gotta close this gap. And now he just gave me a warning. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go totally quiet. And this is a great little tip for you guys. And you've heard it on the show before, but I got him to bugle back at me, right? That doesn't mean I went crazy and started calling at him again. Nope. I went totally silent, and I started closing that distance. I worked my way up that ridge to where I was roughly 40 yards or so. Now, keep in mind, around below the summit of this hill, it's real thick in alder brush. And it's because they had logged it like 20 years ago or something, and it had a lot of real thick alder. And I had to kind of swim my way through it. And so I'm doing this. I'm swimming through this alder brush. I've got my bow. I've got it raised above my head like this. and I'm working my way up, and I get to the very edge of this alder brush, and now it was time. I could see a couple of cows up on top bedded down, and I knew this bull was up there. And boy, did I let him have it. I just let loose this giant, nasty, grumpy old challenge bugle. Growly as all growly as I can get. I demonstrate it for you, but my camera settings are weird right now. And every time I try to bugle on this, the mic cancels out the sound. Don't know how to fix that. Anyway, I let that bugle out, and man, before I could even finish, I could hear that bull coming to his feet, and he's snarling and growling and howling and calling and bugling back at me. And he comes again. I used that freight train reference earlier. That's what this sounded like. He sounded like a daggum freight train coming down, closing that 40-yard gap I had. I'm like panicking. He reacted way faster than I thought he would. I hit the little button on my remote control camera mode before I'd let the bugle out. In fact, I'd hit that button. So it's all recording, right? And that bull comes down, and he comes on to kind of the right of me through the alder brush. He didn't come to the open spot I was hoping he would come through, but it wouldn't have mattered because he came down, and next thing I know, I've got 10 yards in front of me this giant 6x with a drop tine on his right side staring at me at 12 yards, maybe. He was so close I could have almost reached out and smacked him across the face. And I go to draw my bow, and as I did, that camera that I had strapped to my shoulder strap had fallen down while I was swimming through that alder brush, and it fell right where like to the front. So it was like, instead of going straight up from my shoulder, it was like down on my shoulder almost to my my chest and pointing straight forward. So as I drew back, my bow got tangled in the camera, and that bull is sitting there watching me, and he would have given me plenty of time. If that camera wouldn't have been there, that arrow would have already been released. And I'm looking at the bull. He's looking at me. The cows are all running around mewing. It was like pure chaos. And I cannot unstuck this bowstring from this camera. I release it down, and you can kind of hear me cussing in the background because the camera's recording, right? And I move that camera up, and I go and I clip my bow string and start drawing again. And by the time I had it drawn back, all I could see was the backside of that bull trucking back up the hill, out of my life once again, forever, never to be seen again. So the moral, I guess, of this lesson, of this failure point, if you will, is if you're going to self-film, you really got to know your gear, and you got to pay attention to little things. Like if you move through alder brush, of course it's going to move that thing, right? Of course it's going to get snagged and get in the way of me drawing my bow. I didn't even think about it. Didn't even think that would happen in a million years. Yeah, so hopefully that doesn't happen to you guys. Another little lesson, a failure point, if you will, moving too quick and busting silent bulls. This same spot that happened, the last story I just told you, which, by the way, that would have been hands down the biggest bull I'd ever killed if I would have gotten him. He was a great bull. He was north of 300 easily, super big drop tine, and I believe he's the same bull the year before who had got the drop on me that came in silent. And he had made it through that hunting season, and that was my second encounter with him. So anyway, moving too quick and busting out silent bulls. That has happened to me a lot in the last few years. For some reason, these bulls are coming in super quiet. They hear me calling, and they're coming in to check me out before making a peep. And I get a little reckless and start moving through the country like I own the place, and I don't. They own it. They live there full time. And so I am trying to come up with a solution to this, but the only thing I could think of, and it's kind of worked the last season, it started working for me, but you got to slow down a little bit. If you are in a spot where you're seeing a lot of sign, there's a lot of fresh sign, maybe you smell elk, maybe you've heard a couple of bugles in there, but there's fresh rubs, there's pee on the ground, there's elk crap everywhere. And you could smell them, you could taste them, you could feel their presence. A lot of times you could just feel the presence of a bull elk or any elk for that matter. If you're in that scenario and you're making some cow calls, or maybe you're throwing out a couple of bugles, don't get crazy with your bugle, by the way, before you get an answer. Don't just start like wrecking the landscape with these loud challenge bugles. You got to think of it like if you go into a bar, if you ever, anybody who's been into a bar and you've seen a bar fight, it's not like people just start throwing fists. They first they start yelling at each other and mouthing off to each other, and then they start maybe pushing each other, and then it gets a little bit more intense, and then fists start getting thrown. You got to kind of look at it from that standpoint, and so don't just go into an area and be like, oh man, there's got to be elk in here, and start challenge bugle everything. And I think that we talk about that quite often on the show, and the reason is because every year I hear it. I hear somebody pull up, and I'll be down sitting in the shade waiting for something to change, because I'll move and I'm not getting bugles, but I know there's elk in the area, so I'll just sit down and I'll wait a while, and sometimes I'll wait like 3 hours, and all of a sudden the bulls will start chiming in and they'll start bugling because they heard me earlier but they didn't want to answer, but now they're curious, and so that happens. And so a lot of times I'll be sitting there. And in the country I'm hunting, there's a lot of access. There's roads everywhere. And so you can't really get, you're not going 5 miles away from a road all the time. Sometimes I'm a mile from the road, and I can hear people driving up the road, and I can hear them park, and they'll walk a few hundred yards, and they'll rip out with these giant challenge bugles right off the bat, and they'll wait for a response, nothing. They go back, get in the truck, and drive off. Guys, that is like almost never going to work. It's almost never going to work. It's going to be a total fluke thing if it ever does work. And I never want to say never, because that could happen, but in 99.99% of the times that strategy will never work. And so that's why I bring that up a lot. Getting back to what I was saying, moving through the country, and I know elk are there. I could smell them. I could see the fresh sign. There's fresh rubs. I know they're in there. And I'll start just kind of letting out some cow calls, right? And so instead, what I used to do is I'd let out a cow call, and I'd wait 2 or 3 minutes, let out a little light, location bugle. I'd wait 2 or 3 minutes. If nothing, I start moving, and I start moving quick because I'm trying to cover a lot of country, right? That's what was kind of beat into our mind for many years, was cover ground, call, cover ground, call. Well, don't do that. Slow it down. Make those calls. They're in there. Right? The signs all over the place. They're in there. Make a few cow calls and just stand there in some dark, shadowy brush. Just stand there and wait and listen. You're listening for little teeny nuanced sounds. Sometimes the bulls will do like this really quiet cow call back. It'll just be like, real quick like that. And I'm just doing that with my mouth. Or sometimes it'll be a breath. Something like that. But you'll hear those kind of things, and you'll hear a stick snap. Something like that is what you're listening for, and at that point it's time to knock an arrow, because that bull is coming in silent. Don't go trucking through that country if you know there's elk in there, because they're not far. They might be like 40 yards in the next stand of timber, and you just can't see them. So just hang tight, slow it down, and don't go trucking through that country, because you're going to bust out a lot of bulls. And I've done it a million times, so I know the pain. Okay, the last thing I'm going to tell you this story. This real funny. This is a nice 5-point bull. In fact, the mountain I was telling you about with that drop tine bull, this was the same mountain. But I had skirted the bottom of it and came around to the other side because I'd heard the bull bugling way over there. When I first heard him bugling, he was probably 400 or 500 yards. And so I dropped a bunch of elevation, tried to get on the level that I kind of roughly thought he was on, and was skirting the bottom of this hill to try to get on his level and call him in. Well, it worked perfect. I got to where I thought he was within about 70 yards or so. And it wasn't an aggressive call. I just let out a nice, solid locator bugle. And he got pretty excited, and he came in. And I could see him coming from a long way. He came right out of some thick timber, and he's kind of working his way to me fairly cautiously. He'd called. He'd let out a little, non-aggressive bugle back. It was like he was just curious. He wants to see, who is this other fella? I'm going to check this other fella out, right? That's kind of what he was doing. And this happens a lot in that pre-September 15th time frame. they're just curious. They want to see, like, who is this other fella? Does he have cows with him? Do I need to be afraid of him, or do I need to use him as a distraction to get in on the big herd bull? I don't know what goes through their mind. I'm not like an animal behavioralist. It's just stuff I think about, right? And I try to relate it to like human nature, and that's how I come up with some of these conclusions. And he comes moving towards me, comes into about he's about 25 yards, real easy shot. I draw back. And I was so excited. I was like, man, this is the easiest call in I've ever experienced. Like one bugle, and here he is, other than the bugle I'd made like 500 yards ago. And here he is giving me this perfect shot. And he's kind of quartering to me a little bit, but still broadside. And he was in a little bit of sunlight, and I was in real dark timber, so he just couldn't quite see in there. And boom, I released that arrow, and off it goes into about 300 little teeny twigs, smaller than the diameter of a pencil, which proceed to deflect my arrow right over this sucker's back, right? And so he caught on to the fact that something was awry and turned around, and off he went. I actually called him in again, but he came in some real thick stuff, alders, that I couldn't get a shot off. But the point is not the second opportunity I had, is the first opportunity I had. I got so worked up and excited. This was a few years ago, several years ago. I got so worked up and excited about this bull and how easily he had responded to my calling. And I was just like blown away. I was even thinking, as I was drawing my bow, I was like, man, there's that other little cat road down below. I can get my truck right up to it. This pack out's going to be super easy. These are the things going through my mind as this bull's coming in. And I draw back and release it, and that arrow deflects off of every little branch that you can imagine. So I guess getting to the moral of that story is try to calm yourself down. If you get an opportunity, okay, don't do what Jim did. Don't do what I did. Calm yourself down. Pay attention to those little things like limbs and brush and little teeny dead branches that don't have any pine needles or leaves on them because they died. That you don't, I was so focused on the big target, the bull, that I wasn't paying attention to the little things that made a world of difference in this scenario. After going back, after I told you I called him in again, this was like 100 yards further away. I called him back in, and I could see his head, but I couldn't see any body, and so I just never took a second shot on him. Didn't feel right about it, and so I went back after I knew he'd really busted out, because he really saw me the second time. I went back to that initial shot where I let that arrow loose, and I'm looking at it in the clarity of knowing that bull is no longer in front of me. And I'm like, man, I can't believe I didn't see those limbs and those little teeny stick branches going out in every direction that really hindered my shot. And it must have been the adrenaline, that adrenaline blinded me to a detail that was ever so important. And so, again, all this stuff I'm saying to you guys, this is just so, like, if you're in that situation and a bull's coming in, you're going to be like, man, I listened to that episode, School of September, on the Western Huntsman, where he let that arrow fly and it deflected off of all those little teeny mini branches. I'm going to check that, because if I'd have let that bull walk another 10 yards, he would have been a little further from me, but the trajectory he was on, it would have given me a perfectly clear 30-yard shot. And that would have been, I could make that shot all day long because I practice a lot, right? So those are the main stories that I wanted to share with you guys as we're just, knocking on September's door. And hopefully they're just mistakes like that. That's the kind of stuff that keeps me up all night long. I thought about that little bull, I say little, he was a nice 5-point bull. I thought about him for months as I'd lay there in bed trying to sleep and kicking myself, man, Jim, if you would have just let him walk a little bit further, I could have got that arrow in him, and it would have been such an easy pack out, because I could have moved my truck around and all that stuff I was telling you earlier. And so, very exciting stuff, but hopefully that helps you guys. Hopefully, if you guys, are in a scenario too this season, and whether you get a bull or not, if you think of something like, hey, I was in this circumstance, and because I listened to that particular episode, I didn't make that mistake. Well, you guys hit me up. Tell me about that. I love hearing stuff like that. Shoot me a message. You can do jim@thewesternhuntsman.com, or you can do the direct message thing on Instagram is another good way. I love hearing that kind of stuff, and I will answer. Sometimes it takes me a little time to get to everybody, but I will answer it. So it'd be awesome to hear that. Okay, guys. So that's pretty much what I got. I got one more little thing I want to talk to you about before I cut this episode off for this week. But this is like a bonus episode. This is like, the week of 2 School of Septembers. So the last thing I want to leave you guys with as you're gearing up for this season is, how am I going to put this? I have friends and family and folks that I know that are so excited for September, and they go out that opening week and they get burned out. They burn themselves out because it's hot. They don't hear a bugle. They don't see any sign. They run into other hunters, and too many hunters. They're wrecking the plan A that they had. Make sure that you guys have not plan A and plan B, but multiple plans. Have a backup plan for your backup plan, because there's a lot of hunters out there. Hang on, I need some water. There we go. Because there's a lot of hunters out there. And if you have like plan A and you get there at 4:00 in the morning, but some other hunter had the same plan and he gets there at 3:45 in the morning, don't blame that guy. Don't be the guy that gets mad about that. In fact, I always kind of make a habit, if they're still sitting in their truck waiting for the sun to come up or whatever, I'll go talk to them. I'll be like, "Hey man, you going in here? Okay, cool. I'm going to back out. I just, want to wish you luck. And hopefully you get something back there. It's a great spot." There's not very many. When you think about how crowded the woods get in September, and especially like during the rifle hunts and whatnot, you think, man, there's a lot of hunters. But if you contrast that number against the population of your country, we are a very small group. We're a very small group. We're very outnumbered, and we could really do well to give each other a little bit more grace and give each other a little bit more kindness out there. So it will save you a lot of ass ache if you focus on having multiple plans. Okay, somebody's in your plan A spot. No big deal. I got plan B. No big deal. I got plan C. I got plan D. I got plan E and F, and just keep going. It is really critical. And that brings me to the last point that I want to make for you, which is time in the elk woods is the critical equalizer that we all share. It's the equalizer that we all have. Cam Haynes or Aaron Snyder or Brian Barney or any of these big names that sometimes come on this show that we all know, they don't have any more time than you do. They might have more days off from work, or maybe they plan their life, or like I have. I plan my life around elk season. I'm going to tell you, I was in Maui a few months ago with my whole family. My brother was there. I knew my brother was fixing to get married. And I told my little brother while I was there, dude, don't get married in September because I won't come. I won't be able to make it. So what does he do? He's planning to get married all of a sudden, last minute in October. I'm not going to make it. I'm guiding. I'm already committed to it. And so I had to call him and tell him, I warned you about this. But it speaks to the bigger picture that I'm trying to get at here, that your passion and your commitment to archery elk hunting is your personal decision. It's your personal level of commitment, and it's your job to determine what level of prioritization you're going to put on it. For me, I give everybody the rest of the year for my life. There's 11 months in a year where I can have family come and visit. I can go visit them. We can go on vacations. We can go have dinner somewhere. We can have parties, barbecues. We can have weddings and anniversary parties and all this stuff. But September is off limits because September is my month that I reserve as a prioritization in my life. And so I make sure that I have a lot of time off of work. I make sure that I am clear with everybody that I am not available for their birthday party that they're planning in September. Sucks. I'm sorry. Your birthday's in September, but I'm not coming unless you want to come hunting. On top of that, if it is that important to you, time in the woods means that you have to work through the mental gymnastics of getting burned out, especially if you're going out in the early season and you're not hearing bugles and it's hot and it's crowded and there's things that are just kicking your butt, right? Don't get burned out because every day is anew. Every day is a new opportunity, and every day is going to be this reset of possibilities. It might turn out that that day is hot and there's no bugling action, there's no elk action, you're not finding sign, there's other hunters, maybe some wolves moved in. Maybe a windstorm comes in and just wreaks havoc on the sounds that you can hear and the scents that you can smell. And it just feels like you're wasting this time. You put all this time in and you get home and your wife's giving you a hard time because you've been gone so much, all this stuff. Don't let that wreck the next day, because that next day is a new opportunity. It's a new day. There's new possibilities in front of you. It's a reset. It's a total reset. And you have to figure out how to make it a mental reset for you, because you got your butt kicked the day before. Don't let that play into the next day. Don't let that ruin your next day, because the next day is a whole new opportunity for you. New possibility. It's like this. You know how every morning is a new dawn, new fresh sunlight. That's how it needs to be on your mental state. Like, you committed to doing this archery elk hunting thing, you have to put in the time. Don't ever get burned out. And by the 20th of September, be like, you know what? I'm just sick of this. I'm sick of eating freeze-dried meals. I'm sick of hiking. My feet hurt. My back hurts. I'm sick of this pack. I'm sick of hearing myself bugle. I'm sick of walking into this wallow. I'm sick of all this stuff. I'm sick of seeing other hunters out there. Don't get that way. Don't remember this talk. Remember, hey, I committed to archery elk hunting, and there is nothing easy about it. And that's why most people don't do it. Okay. It's hard. It's rugged. It requires a great deal of grit. And if you're listening to this episode, that means that you've got that and it's already built into your psyche. But if you're like me, man, getting beat up every day for a week or 10 days or something, it could wear you out. And you just have to mentally reset yourself and understand that today is not yesterday and today is not last week. Today is a new day and there's new possibilities, and there might be a bugle right around that next ridge. So I'm going to freaking put my grit on. I'm going to wear this grit. I'm going to fill my entire being of grit, and I'm going to keep going. And that's what you got to focus on. And I hope you guys do, because I wish you the best. And you are a like-minded human as I am. And I wish you the very best this September. And I hope that you have straight flying arrows and loud bugles in your face, and you see elk and you notch a tag and you all these things. It's the adventure of a lifetime that you've always hoped it would be. And with that, guys, I'm going to wish you a great season. God bless, and keep me posted. If you're on Instagram, make sure you're tagging me in your elk hunting videos. And I'm not talking about just if you get an elk down. Like, if you're just out there and you get some cool footage, you get a cool encounter, you get a cool picture of a deadhead or whatever, tag me. Be like, hey, we're out here, heard a bugle, and check out this sunset, and tag the Western Huntsman. And I love seeing that stuff, guys. I consider you all, even if I've never talked to you, I consider you guys my people and my friends. And seriously, God bless and good luck out there. Go kill a bull now.
You made it. That's the end of the episode. Thank you so much for tuning in. Please make sure you're following us on Instagram at The Western Huntsman, and write us a good review at Apple Podcasts. Thanks, guys. See you next time. Stay Western, and I'll see you on the mountain.